On this episode of the podcast, I have with me Dr. Andrea Isoni. He is the Chief AI Officer at AI Technologies. We're going to be talking about being integrated with AI. I think a lot of people probably don't realize how much AI already helps them every day, and it is a little bit of a co-pilot, but we're going to start seeing more and more adoption of more complex and more integrated solutions. And we're going to be talking about those areas with Andrea, and also we're going to be talking about the implication of media's impact on AI. And as we get more comfortable with AI, that co-pilot piece is going to be something that we're going to have to start adjusting our workflows to. So a bunch of stuff we're going to try to get to, see as much as we can. Andrea, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Before we start, just tell us at a high level, I guess, a little bit about who you are before we dive into the topic.
Yeah, sure. As a job, I do what is now called Chief AI Officer, which practically means I manage data scientists and or developer to develop bespoke AI solution for clients. The company is called AI Technologies. And yeah, I work in different industries. At the moment, it's a lot on cybersecurity and manufacturing automation, but it can vary. It varied in the past. And yeah, we are developing bespoke solution for them. That's all I do as a job. And on the side, I do just auto-completeness on the side. I'm also advisor for maybe your audience know ISO, International Standard Organization for artificial intelligence. What else? So we are drafting the new policies that people can be certified on in AI.
Awesome. I'm sure there's a ton of development there on its own, but the topic is about adoption, and I guess there's a couple facets to that, right? Obviously, there are tools that we're currently using that are AI, that are in one capacity or another already in our lives. And then obviously we're seeing a ton of other tools come out that are these co-pilots to kind of help us get our job done efficiently. We hear a lot about AI taking jobs, obviously, more about that than it complementing our jobs. So that's when we can get into. And obviously we can talk about the media and what it's made AI to seem. And I think Hollywood does a great job of portraying future technologies in ways that kind of just sit in our mind. But let's talk about the adoption piece of what we have now, right? And you mentioned, when I've spoken to you before, you mentioned there are devices that everyday people use. It is AI. I think the audience, mostly being technology professionals, are pretty comfortable with a lot of those things. But I guess if you were looking at it from an adoption standpoint of enterprises adopting more AI, we already have it. How is that going to help us bridge to those more complex solutions down the road?
Probably for the audience, it's best to, as you said, that we are already using a lot of AI, many products to be touching. I'm sure at least daily, everyone or almost everyone use Google, right? Or a search engine to be less company specific. And a search engine is pretty much an AI enabled tool in which it is how a search engine works. Just an example, you take a bunch from the internet, otherwise will be called dark web. Everything will be dark, as in nobody could search anything. They search all of that, and then they categorize and they understand what to suggest to you based on the research. Probably if you are logging in their account, they know a little bit more about you, so they have a more customized feed into your news or in any search you're doing. And this is the quickest, I think, the most common product that everybody, I believe, are using today. But there are also hardware products that are touching the market, like I think we mentioned before when we talked before, the Apple Watch or things like that. So there are actually products that now are literally touching our skin, increasingly more. But in the future, there would be solution like called BCI, brain computer interface, for the crowd, or the audience that maybe follow the news. One of the most renowned / more in the news companies called Neuralink, things like that. But it's not the only one, by the way. they design chips and or interfaces, internal or external to the scalp, to essentially communicate with others or make people aware of other people thought. Quote what I mean by thought, because nobody exactly know, directly, automatically, without essentially using language. But that's obviously, we are talking about 50 to 100 years for now. But that doesn't mean that we don't have already things that can relate to human emotion and or feelings and or thought, just using similar thing to the Apple Watch, because the Apple Watch, for example, it has already sensor that is measuring the heart rate or things like that, and based on the heart rate, somehow, somewhere, if you look on the literature, you will find that it's possible to predict broadly certain type of emotion, because obviously if you're excited, you are a bit. I'm simplifying, obviously. I'm aware that I'm cutting through a lot of stuff here, but roughly speaking, the heart rate is highly correlated to emotion, and certain type of emotion more than others. So it's already possible, not necessarily going to the leading edge or to there, which is brain computer interface. So yeah, there are today things that are already piece of hardware that are literally on our skin, will be even more. The VR, Apple Pro, I think it's called Apple Vision Pro. Oh yeah, Vision Pro. I mean, all these system needs to have sophisticated data-related algorithm, because that's what AI algorithm is, a data-related algorithm. Takes various data and then does a prediction or something like that. Based on that, they are present in the market. And that's for the consumer. For the industry, it's a little bit different. The reason is industries usually are related to legacy infrastructure and product they're already using, which means if a company and or an industry is already very profitable, has less incentive to change because it doesn't feel the urge. Without mentioning too many industry, but definitely oil and gas is one of the more conservative, or banking system, the more conservative. It's not because they are bad or anything like that. It's because first are highly regulated. Certain are very highly regulated. So to change something in a really regulated industry is tougher. Second, if the industry is already profitable per se, you don't feel really the need. Therefore, you will see adoption of technology faster when the industry really need to create profit. Retail or what else? Manufacturing, finance product, not banking, but certain finance products are highly competitive, low margin. Then you will see rapid adoption. But again, the rapid adoption is not as rapid as the consumer adoption. To put in perspective, ChatGPT, which is, by the way, is not really mass adopted now. I think it's about 10% of US population, they at least use it once today. So 10% of US population use it once today, max. So it's not mass adoption. In case of the industry, it's even slower. That again, because you have already a legacy system, you need to comply with regulation, and that create a slow rolling ball to really adopt these technologies. And you will see in the next 5 years something like that, as in wide adoption. Obviously, if you're talking about people that do proof of concept, which obviously we are already doing, and also putting on scale production certain things, obviously they are already doing now.
I guess to ask you maybe a follow-up or two regarding this. So obviously the consumer adoption, right? That's we're seeing it, we're hearing about it. Only 10%. So obviously we're hearing a lot more about it than maybe we actually are seeing in real adoption. 100% can understand enterprises don't typically like to spend money on things that are not going to directly benefit the bottom line. So I guess we are hearing a lot of AI in organizations And I guess you mentioned pilot programs, right? So obviously somebody has to start somewhere to prove an ROI. When I first did my first episode of this podcast 3 years ago, the first couple of guests were CEOs of AI companies. And my question then was, how do you measure ROI? Because it's something brand new to the enterprise. I think 3+ years have passed, and I still ask the same question of when a company launches a pilot, and it's not something where we can determine efficiency is hard for people to put numbers on. Like, it's very hard for us to go, well, this is a 20% improvement. What does that really mean financially for us? When you look at ROI and you're looking at pilot programs that enterprises are just beginning to look at, how will they evaluate success to go, I spend more money in this, or, hey, you know what, this is great, but it's not going to impact the bottom line?
Yeah, so this is a great question. And as you said, it's just, but by the way, my work is something that I constantly need to face with clients when we develop the product and the project that we're doing for them. And there are two ways to justify a return on investment for the company. One is obviously based on the procedure they are already using it. Forget about AI. Before AI, after AI, essentially. Before AI, what essentially the company is doing now, and you have an efficiency measure, whatever that is. If you've implemented AI, obviously you need to improve significantly to justify the budget. And therefore, that's what you measure, the before and after. Okay? Certain time, if you do R&D project, it's not possible because there is no before AI. There's nothing. There's a new product or a new solution that was never implemented. So in those cases, you need to make sure two things. One is, if there is an AP, how valuable is the AP? We're working, for example, in a situation which we did bespoke solution for video games. It's complicated now, but if you ask me, I'll tell you more. But anyway, those IP, the value, by the way, in our case was audited. So we developed the code was audited, there was a price tag on it. And the price tag obviously needs to be significantly more than they spent to us. Simple. That's another way to essentially do it. Other way is measuring error rates, but only in cases in which the potential mistake is very costly for the company. So essentially, I don't know, if you are manufacturing some, special chemical component, and if you don't check that, the chain in the supply chain will be distorted, and there is X amount of damage per mistake. If you reduce the error rate percentually, then you know that you probably are reducing, the potential cost after. Or another way is for, insurances or things like that. Because if you reduce the error in certain operation, then they can reduce the cost of insurance. Because obviously it's less likely, and so the premium, as it's called, of insurance, it costs less. That's other ways to justify that. So there are various ways. It's an art, more than a science. Well, within an extent, as I say, there are ways to calculate that, but it's very case dependent. Depend on the specific company, the financial industry, and the specific project. Hopefully, I give a rough idea.
No, absolutely. And I like it. And I guess maybe the adoption piece to these pilots, right? So ROI is obviously in the end what has to be established to measure you're going to roll out to more teams, departments, company-wide, all those things. Is it a line of business app? I mean, there's a ton of things that go into it. But when we look at adoption, right, we have these pilots, they're working. We're trying to get people to use them, trying to change some of their workflow. So they have to alter how they are doing their job. They have to learn how to use this, whether it's a co-pilot or whatever output this is. They have to learn how to use it and trust it. I guess adoption a lot of times does have a trust component. Do I trust whatever this is to help me? The output, the efficiency, the ease, all these different things. When you're looking at adoption from these early pilots that are being rolled out, what are some of the key factors to making sure that people actually use it?
The usability after you do a pilot, and let's be honest with that, most of the pilots that you do for variety of reasons, is a company or direction or strategy reason, go out to the shelf. You did it, fantastic, but then you just go out to the shelf. To me, the usability or the reason why a company decides to use that in a practical term is really depends how the stakeholder related to the project really want to why they did it in the first place. They did it just for checking what was possible, and then the probability that it's going to be adopted or not, as in a live scenario, it depends. It's not known a priori. They do because they want really to transform the company, make it more efficient for various then there is highly chance to that if it was, they are gonna proceed.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of the day, I think and the assumption is obviously the pilot project goes well, there is a return on investment, etc., which happens most of the times. At least for us, is almost 90% of the time we deliver that. In that case, the commitment really depends on the stakeholder management, on do I want to make the effort to really transform this company, and I can grow with the company during the transformation. So these people will have a career path attached to the adoption of the technology, essentially, within the company, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does. And it's interesting because I think as I guess we could even move outside AI, just general projects. I mean, obviously, adoption is the key, right? So, technology is notorious for rolling out enterprise solutions that are not used appropriately, used to the fullest. They're not, they don't see their full potential. They do get shelved. I mean, it's not an uncommon thing to see with AI. I think it's interesting whether it's Gen AI or another form of AI or machine learning or whatever it might be behind the scenes. It's almost like a chicken and the egg. You need that adoption piece to prove out the concept, but also that change management is a big impact. And I think the trust is really what's interesting to me is people have to trust consistent output to know that it's helping them do their job, because obviously we haven't come to this scenario where if somebody was using AI as a co-pilot and it produced incorrect output, who's going to be judged for that? Is it the employee? I mean, they have to go back and go, well, I show this is the output of the AI. Hey, it wasn't my fault. I mean, they have to now, because, the other component is the managers who are managing those employees that are potentially using co-pilot or AI assistants have to become comfortable to knowing that I can't just hold the employee accountable. It could be the output of a Gen AI solution. So, I think those little nuances are very early stage, and obviously we're still at the beginning, but I think these are things that when we talk about adoption have to be solved. If not, I mean, if you don't use it, you're maybe safer.
Oh yeah, you're right. And that comes to the end of two things, essentially. One is so incident response or incident procedure. That's what it means, right? And by the way, that's kind of a standard concept on ISO, whatever ISO you're doing, or the company that ISO certificate for quality or cybersecurity 9001, 27001, and now the new one 42001, for example, on AI. So essentially, whenever incident happens or unexpected out of the AI solution, an incident happen, you have a procedure to follow. First of all, to record it, a second to reconcile or essentially make it right after somehow, somewhere. So more than the AI product or solution itself, you shift the trust from the product itself to the procedure around the product. So you are kind of confident, if that makes sense. If something goes wrong, which is natural, and whenever human beings do something, there's a chance that something goes wrong. You trust that the procedure to handle the incident is good, and you can trust that.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense. So that's, to me, is the first thing. Obviously, this is compounded when the industry per se is already regulated. If you are acting in an already regulated industry, healthcare, banking systems, whatever, the very highly regulated, adding a new, even for them is really a problem, because they already have a lot of regulation, a lot of compliance, and they don't want to be on the hot spot. But that said, overall, the way is to shift from the actual single AI model to a procedure that you actually can tell when things goes wrong.
I guess, and we're seeing a lot of people. We mentioned consumer adoption, right? And ChatGPT it's still, you mentioned 10%, and obviously we hear a lot about it. People are discovering it. I feel like this is when search engines first came out, and people were discovering search engines, and they're blown away that they could, search all this information. I feel like we're kind of at that same early stage feeling. But obviously, people are getting comfortable with this notion that a Gen AI solution is a single, data input in and data input out. And a lot of times it's being used for very rudimentary things. Can you clean up my email? Can you tell me about this? And the facts are also being provided as though ChatGPT or similar Gen AI tools are domain authorities, right? And we're assuming they are because they've learned and people are validating the output at larger scales. When you're looking at people's perceptions of this potential way they're interacting with ChatGPT or other Gen AI tools like this for consumers, is that going to shape the solution the enterprise has to provide so that the user will be comfortable, or will they potentially have to understand that, hey, that was that, it's on the consumer side? And it's kind of like, enterprises at one point 10 years ago tried to make things look like social, consumer apps. They tried to make enterprise apps look like Facebook, and it didn't work. Are we going to face anything like that with the consumer side and the expectation on the enterprise side?
So essentially, if I understand the question is, they will try in the industry side, they will try to essentially do their own replicas of the consumer side. Is that
user
the question?
Experience? Yeah, the user experience side of what they see.
Yeah, it's very early stage to say that. There is also another commonality. The commonality with Google is way better in the sense that, at the end of the day, if you think about it, obviously I'm speculating as well, but just to be clear on that, I do not know the answers. I don't have the crystal ball on that. That said, since the analogy with Google, as you say, which I pretty much agree with the analogy, at the end of the day, I don't see a particular difference in the interface of Google if you're using that for business or for a consumer situation. The only difference probably is on the data you can access. Yeah. Which means if you go on Google and you search whatever you search, the list of things that are being retrieved for you would be different if you doing privately or if you do through a business, because the business cannot show you certain stuff, for example, whatever that may be. I think that's the kind of situation. So when you add, a large language model or ChatGPT for a business, you have a curated list of things that can be shown, not shown, and a language suitable for business, conversations and more colloquial forms. That's the kind, at this moment in time, that's the way I would say this is the difference. There's no massive difference. It's just a way of, at the end of the day, the way these large language models are used today, or the way modern are used, we find, so essentially, as any technology, we find the technology, then we find the application of the technology. large language model at this very moment in time are the application of these technologies to generate either text or images or videos now, so things like that, yeah? And the way you generate depends on the business purposes. So if you are in a more regulated or formal environment, such as certain industries, then the output and the input that you provide has to follow certain standards and layout. It will be more wild in the personal consumer space. That's at least the difference I see, but I don't see much more, at least now.
Yeah, obviously we're very early stage, as you mentioned.
Yeah,
Chat GPTs are. I think we're getting a lot of conversation around it. I think people are seeing, obviously the market for anything AI go up. People are trying to quickly adopt it. There is a lot of moving parts, and I think a lot of pressure is obviously on technology leaders to find how they can leverage it. Obviously, there is going to be massive impact. I don't know if we 100% yet know, where that is. I think, it might all shift. Yeah, I think, going back to Google and you look at the web itself, I mean, from version 0, Gopher, to what we have now, I mean, it's transformed. And I can only imagine we're going to see a completely different architecture. I don't know the speed. I mean, the speed could not be 20 years. It could be 5, 10, who knows? But I think it's going to be very interesting to watch.
If anything, I want to add this. If anything, the result of even a mild adoption, which I don't think it will be mild, but let's assume a mild adoption of this technology will be an increase in spend in cybersecurity. That's 100%. That's 100%. Because unfortunately, these things are vulnerable to all sorts of type of attack or things like that. And the adoption of these invariably will mean spending more on cyber. That's unfortunately is the trade-off. So it's important also to understand that, because you're asking me about the return of investment. So this is, to me, is important. I always say to the client, yes, you're going to adopt that. That will be the return on investment, as in spare money, spare on the process, or more revenue, whatever. However, at this proportion, you will need to spend more in cyber, which kind of reduce the return of investment, if you think about it. But it has to be calculated.
Yeah, no, that's actually interesting, because I think that lends itself to, if we look at each version of technology that's come out, there's been a corresponding evolution in the threat against that via cybersecurity. So it seems like, I'm not sure who's a step ahead. I think it depends on when you catch the time of day, but you're seeing that. So, I mean, just listening to you, I can also think, okay, as we get more Gen AI solutions, there'll be people looking for vulnerabilities of injecting something within that Gen AI environment to alter the output, which then is difficult to learn from. So these are beyond my comprehension. I'm sure you're having questions answered, but I guess, you did mention the impact to ROI, and we're still early phase, we're still adopting. If you're looking down the road, crystal ball type question, if you're looking down the road and you're looking at where software has been and where it's going, I guess the famous quote, software eats the world. Are we just seeing an extension of software just evolving, and we're just calling it Gen AI, or is this just a new paradigm, or is it just, hey, this is what happens when you have software engineering and technology for the last 30 years build on itself? We're going to advance into these areas.
Yeah, I think it's kind of an evolution. The way I see, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the way you used to build, quick example, a website, yeah, which is very, I don't want to diminish anyone that's doing that job. In fact, sometimes it's complicated depending on how complicated the website is. That said, this kind of developing the website is something that now is kind of, for example, there are services that develop your website with drag and drop, things like that. And AI can do our website now with, there are new tools and stuff, without saying names, in which you can literally develop a website. what I'm trying to say is a chunk of the software development you were doing until a few years ago is evolving, as you say, in different kinds of development. And what are these kinds of development? To me, are kind of two, three things. One is definitely integration. Integration of, there are a plethora of different components of things like that. And to find out these things all integrate to each other, that's a job that someone has to do it. Asking a machine to do that is, at the moment, is way beyond. So essentially, even if, let's say, in 5 years from now, or even 1 year, who knows, there will be fully capable AI machine able to do a website. And the other side, there will be a banking solution. This is speculation, obviously. There is still a moment in which these things need to interact in different way, in different touching points. This interaction cannot be done by the machine, even in the ideal case in which fully developed separately from the machine. The interaction of that has to be human somehow, somewhere, for various reasons. Even the decision how you do it. It's not a machine. It can suggest you, but at the end of the day, you have to connect, the cables somehow, somewhere. So all this integration part will be still human. Obviously, there will be still more people doing in the research and the customization of this single machine and tooling. And then there will be probably a lot more people that will what is now called prompt engineering. Not that I'm a big fan of prompt engineering, so essentially using just the machine, etc. There will be an add element of that. Essentially, they will use some API / GPT or whatever. They will customize this machine for whatever specific job it is. So it's part of integration, part customization, and part still advancement or leading edge solution, more hardcore stuff. But yes, certain things like website or things like that, in most part, they will be solved. And then there will be a huge amount of increase in terms of job offering in assurance. As you say, how can we trust these machines or things like that? So if you have 10 web developers, maybe 2 will be still 10 developers. The rest will be done by the machine, obviously. But then you have a huge increase on assurance. Because yes, of course, before you need to pay by 10 developers. Now you need to pay 2. 2 plus something. It's not just the price of 2. The added level of it is because of the assurance. You are gonna put, the volume of web design or web things, since it costs less, will expand. But in the expansion, it means you also need to, pay more in assurance, verifying that the website is correct, etc. Cybersecurity, door, etc. Assurance in the broad sense, so including cybersecurity, which is, it's not the same, I know, but it's a key of that, yeah? Ensuring that everything is kind of right. That will hugely increment. That's at least the way I see it.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. We're going to see a rise in functional jobs. I think that could be a very interesting impact and repercussion that we're not ready for. Less software engineering, less engineering, more functional. Assurance, quality, data quality. I mean, there's going to be a lot of things, and I'm sure we'll see a whole industry of tools develop. As we always see that every technology boom, we see tools associated with it. So exciting times. Andrea, appreciate your time. Thank you for coming on, answering some questions for now and some questions for the future. If somebody wants to touch base with you, discuss anything AI or something you mentioned on the podcast, what's a good way of getting a hold of you?
I'm very active on LinkedIn, so you can easily find me, Andrea Isoni, on LinkedIn, and you will find me easily. Otherwise, probably the best is contact me directly at andrea@aitechnology.co, no M at the end. I'm looking forward to see if someone has any question.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate your time. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.
Absolutely. That's it for the episode. Be back again, different guests, different topic. Until then, two things. One, I think a couple things we mentioned on the show, critically around adoption, potentially impacts around. I think Andrea brought a great point that as we see more AI, we will see other issues. And I think cybersecurity and quality are just the tip of the iceberg. I think we haven't even begun to realize it, but I think great points made. Please share this episode with somebody else who is interested in learning about AI and especially adoption. That's what we covered a lot about. So appreciate that as you share this episode. Please like, subscribe, comment. Let me know how the podcast is doing. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.